my friends, and welcome to PostScript Interviews. This is a series that we do episodically, typically once a month or so, often around the speakers that are part of our Transition Talk series. And this last Transition Talk, I was the speaker, and so as we've done in the past, we've asked our friend Karin Sokel to be the interviewer, and I will be the subject of all this. And Karin, it's very nice to have you with us.
Oh, it's great to be back.
Yeah. Karin is a coach. She works with individuals and corporations and was closely associated with Dr. Joe Dispenza's work. And we've known each other for a number of years. So, Karin, over to you.
Thank you, John. Again, good to be back. It's hard to believe that 5.5 months has gone by since we last did this.
Yeah.
So thank you for having me.
Yeah, sure. Of course.
Well, I'm going to get right to the solution, which you gave us right up front with your talk.
Mm-hmm.
The solution to these times, to preparation, especially over these next few years, in the midst of everything going on. The solution is we have to expand our awareness. That's the answer. That's the preparation. The challenge with that is we are living during such unprecedented times. Chaos, confusion, hard to know what to believe, who to believe. People are in fear. So the idea of expanding consciousness or awareness is kind of like, who can think about that? We're just trying to survive and figure out what we're doing. So I am always interested in where and how you get your information, where it comes from. You wrote an article a number of years ago that talked about your desire to be way outside of the box, especially as an engineer. I find that fascinating, and a futurist. So tell us how you're getting your information and why.
Well, the whole idea of having expanded awareness comes from the understanding, at least from my point of view, that almost every bit of imagery or every term that is used to describe this transition or this expansion or evolution or awakening or whatever it turns out to be is, in effect, an expanded awareness. This whole process of this jump, this evolutionary jump, is, if you think about it in kind of practical terms, it's kind of becoming aware of a larger kind of reality, a big, broader, deeper, larger reality. And so I've kind of, my whole career has been about trying to really reach outside and try to understand. Early on, I remember one of the first projects I did for the Secretary of Defense, it suddenly became clear to me that the future is way outside of the box. The future is not inside the box, because the conventional wisdom, when things become obvious, then they're inside the box. Everybody knows about it. And what happens is that the future starts to kind of bubble up way out on the fringy edges. And that I used to talk about it as being it's a junkyard out there with some diamonds that are buried in the middle of the junk, and you got to kind of work your way through all the trash to find the important things. But it continues to be the case because there's a lot of speculation and prognostication and that people do about what's going to happen in the future. But the fact of the matter is that all of the things that ultimately come to shape our lives on a day-to-day basis start somewhere else with a little idea or a little thought somewhere else. And so I have tried to, in a sense, specialize in that, is to just wander around unencumbered by convention, in a sense, while still being tethered to reality enough to not go crazy and believe everything. I mean, what you can't do is believe everything, or there needs to be a clear process of evaluation, and but when you have a high rate of change where a whole lot of things are coming, and they increase in not only velocity but also in substance, if you don't get out in front and be able to see some of these things, then you get surprised. By definition, they show up, boom, in your face, and that generates fear. And fear is the antithesis of what it takes to make our way through all of this. And so I read a great deal. I will watch, as you know from having looked at all the books on my floor.
Yes, I've seen them. I'm awed by it all. Quite a library.
And watch. I usually read in the middle of the night for a couple of hours, and also a lot of videos and other such things. And then I have a wonderful network of friends that often are very creative and out of the box kinds of folks. And so it's the combination of all these things I use to kind of bring together what I believe is right. Yeah. And then there's an internal kind of knowing that shows up every once in a while for me that tells me that I'm on the right track. And so in the face of, and particularly now where there's so much in play and so many moving balls, in the air, to kind of understand and navigate a path through it all, you really got to go back to and literally almost ask. I ask and say, "Is this right? Does this work?"
I call that resonance. It resonates with me.
Yeah.
Intuition. One of those diamonds that you talked about that I'm fascinated by, and I want to expand my understanding, is you talk about the nature of the universe and what's happening in the universe with waves of energy and the sun in the center of the galaxy. We talked about that a little bit last time, but it seems that it's so relevant in terms of what's going on. So can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'm on the back end of this because I don't sense any of these things. There are people, of course, who say that they can sense all of this energy and so on. And so I'm really just dependent upon folks describing it as best they can. But there is clearly, as a product, both of is happening in the center of the galaxy. There are waves of energy that are coming out of the center of the galaxy, and those energetic waves affect the sun, and they hit the earth directly and affect humans and the earth. And the combination of all of those things, then the sun does different things and sends different energy. The combination of all of that in terms of how it affects humans is that it is enabling, it is turning on strings of DNA that have been dormant for a long time. And that is essentially the evolutionary, the biologically, psychologically, spiritual kind of evolutionary kind of process. And in that process, of course, you get back to this expanding awareness that comes from suddenly seeing things and being able to do things and seeing the world and seeing the whole reality in a different way. And so what you have is channelers and psychics and other kinds of folks who are all talking about the fact that these waves of energy are coming through. And some people are very, very sensitive to them. And it's not just that they can identify that there's been an energy kind of wave. It's like the wind blows or something, but they can, kind of suss the character of the different waves and what they do. And I can't do that. And so I would love to have some kind of a sense of what's happening in those kinds of terms. I mean, it's kind of like thinking if you're in a storm or something and the waves, the wind is coming, and to have some idea of kind of the strength and how often and the gusts and other such things. And I don't have any kind of sense of that. But there is a general awakening that is happening. And uh, certainly in terms of, things like the disclosure of extraterrestrial life, which is a really hot topic this week. There are just all kinds of breakthroughs and things that are happening in it.
Yes, there was a 60 Minutes segment on Sunday, which I thought was really fascinating.
It was great, Lou Alexander.
Yeah. So things are coming faster and faster. I mean, it's amazing just in this last 5 months how quickly things seem to be unraveling and expanding. And so when we talk about the cosmos, I think about the concept of the matrix, which is, in my understanding, it permeates everything and everyone. And how does that relate then to sort of electromagnetic frequencies and these waves? And
well, in my talk, I talked about the Arcturians describe how kind of the universe works, and that almost in cinematic terms, it's like the movie. It's a matrix, and that there is this the threads of the fabric are energetic threads. They're like in space wires where electricity kind of flows, and where the intersection of those lines are is where stars show up and planets and other such things. And obviously, it is three-dimensional, and it is very complex, and it is highly dynamic because, the planets are moving around, the stars are moving, the whole thing's moving, to say nothing about people and everything else at a more granular level. And so it is, it's an amazing, like I say, a three-dimensional, that's almost like a big piece of jello or something that's jiggling and moving, and internally and externally, and with huge, extraordinary amounts of energy, of information associated with it all. And if you even begin to try to wrap your head around that concept, you're immediately driven to the point where you say, God, we don't know anything about this stuff. I mean, what we think we know is so little compared to how the whole system kind of works. But that's the way they describe it. And then the waves of energy then flow through these lines, these fabric, these kind of connections. I remember many years ago reading things about where psychics and shamans in particular would say that when you talk to somebody, that there is a connection, an electrical connection that connects between the two of you when you talk. And when you think about somebody, there's a connection that happens. Well, that's what happens writ large, apparently. And these waves of energy kind of propagate across that matrix, that fabric of space and time. And they affect us all because we're all electric.
Yeah. And the idea that there are multi-dimensional experiences happening simultaneously as we're living in this what we think is one reality of a three-dimensional world, a linear world. Unless we expand our awareness, we are stuck in sort of that box.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, when you play in this space, you get people talk about 10 dimensions or 12 dimensions or whatever it is, and if you are at all kind of mathematically or scientifically inclined, and people try to talk about visualizing what 4 or 5 dimensions would look like, I have never found anyone who could. I mean, I suspect that somewhere there's somebody who's been able to visualize what that might look like just in 4 or 5 dimensions, but I can't do that. And if you think about the possibility that there's 7 or 8 or 10 or whatever it turns out to be, I mean, you're immediately in, and each one of them is, an order of magnitude 10 times at least more complex than the one that earlier one. And so it's just very, very, I mean, you need to approach this with a great deal of tentativeness. You need to, you can't be arrogant about this, because we're really working our way into space that we really don't understand. And, it responds to our goodwill and so on. And so it's not dangerous, but to presume that we really understand how it all works, I think is a little much of a reach.
Well, in my work with Dr. Joe's work, which is a lot of neuroscience, we learn that in order to expand awareness or consciousness, you have to start learning about new information, such as the information outside of the box. The more we learn about multidimensional reality, which is what I love about the resources that you used for your talk, the more we can start to expand the possibilities. Well, maybe there is this option or this ability to be able to see beyond what my reality is right now. So I love that you help us kind of expand and look at other possibilities, particularly at this time.
Yeah.
Because in the midst of all this, I think that we get stuck in the same belief systems. And as a result, we are seeing most people, most of the time these days, are their beliefs are through the lens of fear.
Absolutely.
And so my question is that being orchestrated in your opinion?
Of course.
And if so, how, who, and why?
Humans want continuity. They want predictability. They want comfort. And all of those things are kind of the other side of the spectrum from high, unanticipated, unknown change that comes with chaos and so on. And so it's very hard for humans to deal. They don't naturally deal with change, and that then generates, when it starts to happen, then it becomes fearful. Because they're also myopic. They, for the most part, people think about things that are just in their near field of view, and so they don't see the things that are coming downstream. And I think that's what I try to do, and what we tried to do on Saturday when we did this talk, is to try to expand out so that you're aware of the possibility, so that if they show up, you don't say, what in the world was that? You say, oh, I thought about that one. That would mean this. And so you have a framework. That's the whole basis of trying to systematically think about the future, is not so much to predict the future, but to think about the alternative paths going forward. It's like drawing the map, right? So that you can see that you could go this way to get to Cleveland, or you could go this way, or you could go up the north to by the lake, or whatever that is. But if you didn't have the map, then you wouldn't have any idea what was happening as you were driving down the road, to kind of stretch the metaphor. And so, this is all about how do you kind of get from here to there? I forgot the rest of your question.
Yeah, well, and beautiful, because it just leads right into it. So, if we have a map, but our attention isn't on that map,
right,
and someone or something, we just look at the news, look at the information that is out there, and the information that I'm not able to easily get, because in my opinion, it's being kept from me at times.
Oh, yeah.
So what's that all about?
Well, there are multiple, which early in this conversation, we talked about the fact that there's other dimensions and other life forces and other kind of things in those dimensions. And clearly there are some entities and forces and that are let's say you're playing a role of of what we can consider negativity. Now, if it depends on your worldview here, how you understand these things. But if you have a worldview that says that this is all a play, this is all some kind of a game, and we're all playing roles here, and there is no right or wrong or evil or good or so on, but it's really a schoolroom where you're in here with different scenarios and situations are offered to you to try to learn how to respond effectively. Well, the way you learn how to respond effectively is to be given different kind of situations that you have to respond to. I mean, you know, my background is in the military, and you train for all these kinds of different possibilities, so that if in fact something shows up, you say, I know what that is, and I know what to do. And it's not all kind of original thought on the spur, trying to figure out. And so there are, and by the way, you don't, just to make the point, you cannot learn if you don't do things differently. And so these events that come into our lives, seemingly negative events, are really learning opportunities, and they're presented in those kinds of ways. Okay, so now we've got the biggest transition, the biggest kind of decision to be made, this big jump by humanity. And predictably, you've got a big force on the other side, a negative force that is struggling, and you're having to figure out, I mean, it's a game, you know, like a internet or a game or a video game where you're trying to work your way over the mountain and through the thing and whatever it's coming and so on. And it's all about trying to raise yourself to a new level of awareness and being able to make decisions and so on. And so, yeah, there are big forces that are in play. And my guess is that we're all running out of time, relatively speaking. That the end of the play or the end of the game is coming up here pretty quick. And they know that, and, you know, we know that. This stage of the game, this chapter of the book, if you will, it's not the end of all of the game. And so, you know, they're doing everything they can to try to capture as many people for their side as possible. And so that's very well kind of organized, and there are all kinds of folks in the system, the bankers and the families and the whatever, and the intelligence community that are all part of this thing. And but you know, in the end, the whole nature of a transition from one era to another one is the old reality collapses, implodes, which makes the space for the emergence of a new one. Yeah. And so you're watching them kind of hang on and do everything they can, and, you know, fake news and all of you can't tell what's real anymore. But that's really gives us the opportunity to rise to the occasion. To how do you figure out how in the world, if you can't tell what's real from the usual kind of sources of information that all your life you've depended upon, then how do you move into a different kind of space, activate the different kind of capabilities, the inherent capabilities that you have to be able to, you know, make it without CNN or NPR or whatever it is.
You know, this whole talk and this time is about preparing for these next few years. And you talk about the next 6 years. Why the next 6 years?
You know, that's interesting, because there are 3 different sources that I have, completely independent sources that I have had been engaged with in one way or another, who all say that one of the scenarios is the possibility of a solar flare that would happen in 2027. And this big event, David Wilcock talks about this, about how the solar system is moving into a different area of space, into a cloud that's energetically different. It's affecting all the stars. And what's happening as they acquire increased energy, they have big solar flares, he says that 26 of them have had big solar flares out in front of us going into this cloud in the last 2 years. And so it's fair to presume that as the sun moves into that space, the possibility exists that you could have one of these solar flares. Okay, that would be a big catalytic. That would be to make the understatement. That would be a big catalytic event, right? And so it's almost as though that is. It may not be that way. It may just be these waves of energy, and humanity changes their mind and rises to the occasion and expands their awareness and affects all of these other kind of things, because it's all interconnected and it's all consciousness interacting together. And so it may not happen, but there is a scenic track that goes down there and says that you could have this big thing in 2027. And interestingly enough, all three of these guys say 2027. I don't know, but it seems that's kind of the next 6 years seem to be really critical. I mean, it's aggravated or exacerbated by guys like Martin Armstrong, the economist, who has a computer program that's just never been wrong, and it says that you start to get a breakup of countries in the 2025 to 2027, and you got global civil war and so on. And so, I mean, you can, and then all you have to do is look around and see the way things are all coming unglued, and watch kind of incrementally how humans are starting to deal with it. I mean, my sense of it is that the unease is kind of growing, and that people are figuring out they're really been messed with by governments and so on. And there's a point, there's a threshold, there's a hurdle that you cross this thing, and then people say no more. And so you could see yourself into a kind of a broad-based planetary kind of civil war kind of thing against governments, people against governments. And so it's moving. I mean, it's going up, and it just it's a useful period of time, 6-7 years. I mean, it's not just grabbed out of the air, but it gives us a horizon that we can relate to. I mean, practically.
I don't know if there is anyone who would say that something's not up, because things are just happening exponentially, more powerfully, it seems.
But we're out of time.
We're out of time.
Yeah. So, and we can talk about that in the next segment. We'll do another segment here.
Sounds good.
But thank you for the kind questions and the provocative. And thank you for being with us. It's nice to have you with us. We do this, like I say, every month or so. And you can also see other issues and episodes of PostScript where I talk about different issues associated with the future and how we get to where we're going and what might be out there and what we can do about it all. And we hope if you like this that you'll share it with your friends. So thank you.